Chapter 7. Goblin Crisis Rimuru Pav. It had been a week since the incident with the purple-haired ogress, officially marking a full month since I started living in this village with the ogres, and 4 months since I was born into his world. I was currently making my way towards the village center to meet with the princess who had been making me some new clothes. When she and the chiefess had found out that I didn't have any spare clothing aside from the ones I had been wearing, they instantly pulled me over to the weaver's building and had my measurements get taken. And over the last few weeks they've made a couple of clothes for me. Casual, formal, and even a battle attire. I had to deny any armor though, as I wasn't much of a fan, not to mention I had my dragon scales skill to increase my durability where my resistances failed. Honestly, I felt stupid that the elder ogre had managed to chop off my arm when I had such a skill at hand. But it was an important lesson, that just because I had some good skills, doesn't mean I shouldn't practice until using them until they became second nature to me. Anyways, the princess had asked for me to come and create more sticky steel thread for them. Honestly, the ogresses had been asking for a ton of the stuff when they found out I could put my resistances into them. Unfortunately, there was only one of me, so I couldn't make as much as they would like in one sitting. Hey, have you heard the latest reports? Another settlement was attacked last night. Apparently there wasn't a single survivor. I couldn't help but stop in my tracks, my curiosity piqued. The ogres barely gossiped about the things going on outside of their village, let alone other intellectual species. And when they did, it was usually important news brought in by the scouts, and rarely the hunters. There was a group of 4 ogresses talking, and while one normally wouldn't be able to hear what was being said, keen sense helped me pick it up easily. Really, that marks the 4th goblin village this week. Those wolves sure are merciless. Wolves? Goblins? I had so many questions that needed answers. I heard the wolves were trying to take over the forest now that our guardian is gone. Surely they don't think they'd get far, do they? I don't know, but from I also heard that the dire wolf leader had evolved into a black wolf. Great sage. Do you think you could shed some light on what they're talking about? I could have asked the ogresses or anyone from the scouting team really, but this way felt a lot less nosy. Open double angle bracket answer. Goblins are small humanoid creatures that live within the forest of Jura. They are among the weakest of intellectual species, but have a high reproduction rate. Dire wolves are canine creatures that usually live in packs of 100, maybe more if a powerful leader is among them. Based on the words of the ogres, it's most likely the dire wolves are looking to expand their domain now that the individual Viredia's aura has vanished from the forest. Close double angle bracket. I see. So they're wiping out the goblins to expand their territory. It was a logical move on their part, wipe out the weaker species and claim that territory for themselves, but what would happen if other species in the forest ended up doing the same? All this time I had been more worried about the external threats that I hadn't given much thought to the changes that would occur within the great forest of Jura itself. Without Mother to keep the balance and watch over things, the creatures within the forest were most likely going to grab any opportunity to gain more power, be it through subjugating weaker species or wiping them out entirely. I should have realized it sooner that someone would try to claim the top spot within the forest after the storm dragon was gone. And in all honesty, I was tempted to leave it be. I mean, Mother had asked me to watch over the forest, but that didn't mean I had to get involved with every minor change that came from her disappearance. Great sage. What would happen if I were to leave the situation as it is? While I was willing to sit back if the situation could resolve itself, I wasn't about to let something that could negatively impact the whole forest start. Open double angle bracket answer. It would likely be the start of a major power struggle within the great forest of Jura, with various stronger monsters vying for dominance, and the weaker ones being annihilated. The end result would most likely result in a major population drop, leaving the forest vulnerable to invasion or attacks from surrounding nations. Close double angle bracket. Man, what a dilemma. I couldn't help but sigh. I'd hoped to enjoy being just another monster in the forest for a while longer. 'Cause I knew that once other monsters in the forest became aware the son of the storm dragon was here, a lot of responsibilities and expectations would be placed on me. So you think I should just declare my presence for the whole forest? Open double angle bracket answer. Should you wish not to reveal yourself on a grand scheme, the best course of action would be to reveal yourself to the ogres to ensure their continued support. Then personally deal with the goblin crisis. Close double angle bracket. The ogres had certainly proved themselves to be trustworthy monsters, and had been very kind and welcoming during the course of my stay. My only concern was that if I revealed my true identity they would start treating me differently. When I first arrived they treated me like royalty and constantly tried to stay on my good side. It wasn't until recently they started treating me no differently than the next ogre while still maintaining some level of respect. If I told them who my mother was, they would downright worship me. And that was something I wanted to avoid. Still, I'd known since day one that I couldn't hide it forever, and they deserved to know after they basically allowed me to move into their village and basically saved me from a life of solitude. Good morning, princess. I greeted as I walked up to the slightly taller pink-haired ogre. She looked as pretty as always. Good morning, Rimuru, she greeted with a smile of her own as her head tilted sideways slightly. I could feel my heart beat slightly faster in that instant, and quickly moved my gaze away from her before I forgot why I was here. Listen, I know I said I'd provide you and the other weavers with more resistance threads today, but is there a chance I could speak with the chief right now? It's kinda urgent, I told her as my face became serious. The princess looked confused for a second before she shifted to unsure. Bringing her the large sleeve of her left arm, she covered the lower half of her face as she closed her eyes and thought. Well, I don't know if now is a good time. He's currently in a meeting with other members of the village council regarding a matter that has come up in the forest. The princess explained, she really did look sorry about it too. This wouldn't happen to be about the dire wolves and goblins, would it? 'Cause if so then that would be perfect, 'cause what I want to see him about is the goblin crisis. I pressed on, revealing myself in front of the entire ogre leadership wasn't exactly what I had in mind, but it is what it is. Well, normally father wouldn't want to be disturbed during these council sessions. But, she looked hesitant, before she met my gaze with her own. I'm sure he won't mind if it's you, especially given what you want to speak with him about. She added with a nod of her head. Thank you, I said with a nod of gratitude. The princess merely giggled, a sound that was becoming more and more angelic the more I heard it, before leading the way. I gladly followed behind with what I was sure was a stupid smile on my face. Ogre Chief Pav, I see. I muttered as I closed my eyes in deep thought. I'd just been given the full report on the attacks on the goblin settlements by the dire wolves. To think the head of the pack had evolved into a black wolf. And to make things more concerning, what had started as a pack of 60 male wolves had been growing rapidly. Apparently the evolved wolf had seen fit to take all the grown males from the other dire wolf packs within the forest, leaving the women and children to fend for themselves. And now the black wolf led a total of nearly 200 dire wolves. I wasn't concerned about the wolves or goblins, none of those creatures posed a threat to my people. No, what was more worrying was how quickly things had begun to change in the forest. I'd expected other creatures to take Lady Veredia's disappearance as an opportunity, but I never expected the dire wolves to be the first ones to act up on a large scale. I stated as everyone turned their attention to me, while the wolves are of no concern to us given our superior strength, what concerns me more is the shift in balance. Many of the current territories were established by Lady Veredia herself, and some by those she chose to manage the forest, the Dryads. With our guardian gone and the Dryads not being sighted for centuries, chaos is bound to fall into the forest. Father, please allow me and my men to put a stop to the threat the wolves possess. My son asked as he went down on one knee and bowed his head. I couldn't help the sigh that left my lips. My son, always eager to jump into battle. He still didn't understand that the wolves weren't the threat, it was the power struggle that would no doubt follow after should they be allowed to completely take over the goblin territory. Son, yo! I was immediately cut off from what I was about to say as the door was opened and none other than Sir Rimuru came walking in, behind him my daughter who looked rather embarrassed and ashamed for just barging in without knocking, as she should be. Sir Rimuru, is there something I can help you with? We're currently holding a meeting at the moment. I know, the princess told me. He said as he walked into the center of the room. I hope you'll all forgive me for coming in unannounced, but I had to come whilst you were still having this meeting. I've decided to handle the goblin crisis myself. That announcement shocked the entire room. Many of the council members began to talk and mumble amongst themselves. I myself was intrigued by the sudden offer. Sir Rimuru was certainly strong enough to destroy the wolves if need be. The only question going through my mind was why he was doing this. We don't need you help, Majin. My son suddenly shouted out to the shock of everyone in the room, all except Sir Rimuru himself who had an eyebrow raised towards him. Son, hold your tongue. I shouted both in anger and slight fear of what would happen if he angered our guest. Though I had to admit, Sir Rimuru rarely got angry at anything. As a matter of fact, I'd yet to see him angry. I will not. My son shouted back to my shock and that of the other ogres. He stood up and glanced at the other council members present. I felt a pit form in my stomach even before he spoke. I can't be the only one that sees this Majin for what he truly is. Brother, that's enough. The princess called out from beside our guest. No, let him talk. Rimuru suddenly spoke up, silencing all the ogres in the room as they turned to him in shock. However, that shock quickly turned to concern as I saw a look in his emerald eyes I had yet to see from him. On the outside he seemed calm and collected, but in his eyes a small amount of irritation and anger could be seen bubbling to those that looked carefully. He seems to have a lot to get off his chest. And he's obviously not going to rest until he voices his thoughts and gets it all out of his system. Rimuru added before turning his eyes back to the young master. So go ahead, young master, tell us what you were going to say about me. This wasn't good. The situation was escalating faster than I could act to stop it. And at this point there was nothing I could do to stop it. Sir Rimuru had asked my son to speak, and knowing him he wouldn't hesitate to say exactly how he felt. If he wasn't careful, this situation may just cost him his life. From the moment we first encountered you, you've been looking down on me and my people, casually stepping on our pride. Casually accepting my father's hospitality and making him bow his head to you more than once. Earning the approval of my mentor just so you can learn and copy our techniques. Using your thread skills to make excuses to spend time with my mother and sister in order to earn their affection. Several eyes wide in fear as we listened to my foolish son spitefully shout at our guest, that feeling in my chest getting heavier and heavier. And yet, it seemed as though he wasn't done. And yet I haven't seen you do anything that is worthy of such treatment and respect. You're just some wandering Majin whose strength is a bluff in the face of true power. I was at a loss for words. I didn't even know where to begin. And judging by the frightful eyes of everyone in the room, they were of the same opinion. Turning to Sir Rimuru, I was surprised to see that he was actually by far the calmest person in the room. His expression not giving away anything, and his eyes so cold I couldn't help but flinch. You're right, Rimuru said as he closed his eyes, much to the shock of everyone else in the room, myself included, about the power thing. Everything else you were whining about was just pure BS. He went on to clarify. What? My son stammered, completely stupefied by Rimuru's response. If you genuinely feel I've been looking down on you and your people, then I apologize, that was never my intention. But if you claim comes from a place of arrogance and an ego taller than the mountains, then your so-called pride can kiss my ass. Rimuru spat, his mask of a calm expression slowly fading into annoyance. I genuinely like it here, and have done my best to be a good and respectable guest. I respect your father as the leader of this village and am grateful to the elder for all he is teaching me. As for your mother and sister, I just get along really well with them. Giving away some thread is no problem. And we're supposed to just believe you. Guests come and go, but you seem to be slowly worming yourself into our way of life. My son said. I watched in alarm as he drew his blade and pointed it at Rimuru. Many others gasped and even my daughter stepped back. What are your intentions? Have you come to rule over us, or are you merely toying with us until you decide to kill us? Rimuru looked at the blade that was pointed at him, all of us watching with bated breath to how he would respond to what was clearly a threat. If my son somehow managed to survive whatever followed, I'd be sure to give him to highest punishment. Are you sure you want to do that? Rimuru asked, his voice deceptively calm as he slowly brought his right hand to the hilt of his own blade, the air becoming thick and heavy. I allowed you to air out your grievances so we could try and solve this peacefully. But, if you're gonna threaten me, he slowly began to draw his blade, his eyes seeming to narrow into slits. Brother, stop. My daughter stepped in between them with her arms spread out. Both Rimuru and my son looked shocked at her intervention. Rimuru has been nothing but a kind and helpful guest since he first arrived in the village. Despite his prowess, he hasn't looked down on us and has not made any outlandish demands, even going as far as asking us to treat him as we would any other ogre. You keep saying, we, and yet you are the only one who's actually suspicious of Rimuru. Your claims and accusations are unfounded, and your actions are irresponsible. Threatening and attacking Rimuru is foolish and will only result in the deaths of our people. Are you willing to accept such a burden just to soothe your own pride? The entire room was silent as everyone stared wide-eyed at my daughter, who stood glaring at her brother. I'd never seen her so angry before, Sure, I'd seen her get upset, but this kind of anger from her was something new to even me. Still, I couldn't help but feel proud, watching her stand up to her brother for the sake of her people, not to mention preventing a fight from actually breaking out between Sir Rimuru and my son. Sir Rimuru, I spoke up, bringing all eyes on me. Please forgive my son's rudeness and foolish behavior. I'll make sure he's thoroughly punished. I said as I bowed my head once more. It was a shameful display from my son, and given the number of people in the room, word was bound to get around. But farther, quiet, I said sharply towards my son, causing him to flinch at the glare I cast towards him. You've said enough. My son bowed his head begrudgingly, accepting that any further argument would only bring him further trouble than he was already in. I didn't come here to pick a fight with the young master. His fragile ego and arrogance are the least of my concerns right now. Rimuru said as he turned his gaze away from my foolish son and towards me. Right now I'm more concerned with the happenings of the forest. Right, that is why he had come here in the first place. Sir Rimuru had claimed that he would handle the goblin crisis in the forest. Sir Rimuru, please do not worry yourself with this matter. We can handle it. He was a guest in our village, he was already helping out in various ways in the village. As proud ogres, we couldn't rely on him to solve all of our problems. I'm not just doing this for the sake of the ogres, Rimuru suddenly said, his eyes closing as if thinking of something. There is another reason I need to do this myself, and it has to do with something about myself that I have yet to tell you guys. Before I or anyone else could ask Rimuru what he meant by that, a sudden burst of black mist surrounded his body, only to vanish as swiftly as it came. Only Sir Rimuru was gone? Or so I thought until I heard several gasps coming from around the room. Following their wide gazes, I looked towards the floor and was shocked and surprised to see a dragon. Well, to be more precise, it was a hatchling, but still it was a dragon. Sir Rimuru? I asked cautiously as I tried to wrap my head around what was going on right now. Right now in our council chambers was a baby dragon big enough to easily be held in arms. I got my response in the form of a nod from the small dragon. Its body black with the occasional blue diamond-shaped scales, the underside white. Its eyes were green like that of our guest, and its presence similar too. Was this Sir Rimuru's true form? As most of you have probably guessed, this is my true form. Rimuru spoke up, many of us still adjusting to the fact that there was actually a baby dragon in the room. Usually they made their homes in the Canate mountain range found within the Dwargon kingdom, with the strongest among them living at the highest mountain peak of Dwargon, commonly referred to as the Dragon's Roost. Was Sir Rimuru a hatchling that had wandered to far from home? No, that didn't add up with the story he had told us upon arrival, not to mention he hadn't spoken of any friends or family since his arrival. It seems proper introductions are in order, Rimuru said nervously before clearing his throat. I am the elemental dragon Rimuru Tempest, son of the storm dragon, Rimuru Tempest. Everyone in the room was just staring at Rimuru, who seemed unbothered by the numerous shocked eyes on him, as they tried to process the revelation he had just dropped on us. Surely he hadn't just said what I thought he said, right? What? Was the only intelligent response that I could offer in that moment. The guards, the council members, and even my own children had looks of disbelief as they looked at the dragon hatchling. If he truly was the son of our guardian lady, then it would explain why my daughter had not been able to see the true extent of power even with her gifted insight. It would also mean that Sir Rimuru, no, Lord Rimuru was far stronger than we believe. A second Charybdis, the elder muttered in just as much shock and disbelief as he stroked his beard. I honestly hadn't even thought of the other Calamity-class spawn of the Storm Dragon, still trying to process the fact that our guest was the son of our guardian deity. A second what now? Rimuru asked as he reverted back into his humanoid form and turned towards the elder. Charybdis, it is a Calamity-class monster that was born centuries ago, before Lady Viridia was sealed away. It is said that the monster was born from a mass of the Storm Dragon's magicules. The elder explained, my grandfather told me about it long ago. It is a beast without a will of its own and lives for nothing but destruction, laying waste to anything and everything in its path. It is said to be impossible to permanently stop, as it resurrects every few centuries in a permanent cycle of destruction and carnage. Whoa! Rimuru responded as he looked mortified. He then turned towards me nervously. He, Chief. You don't think I'd do that, do you? Of course not, I quickly responded, perhaps a bit too quickly. The last thing I wanted to do was put a strain in the good relationship our village had built with Lord Rimuru over the last month. As the elder said, Charybdis is a monster without a will, it had no consciousness, and is driven by pure instinct alone. While you may both hail from Lady Viridia, that does not mean that you are similar in nature. Yeah, you're right. Rimuru nodded in relief. It was almost as if he had been worried about his own powers for a moment. Besides, unlike Charybdis, I'm not an offshoot of Magicules. I was brought into this world the same way every dragon is, egg and all. If Rimuru truly was born of the storm dragon's blood, rather than Magicules like Charybdis, then that meant he was stronger or had the potential to far surpass that of the Calamity-class monster. Still though, doesn't that make us siblings or something? Maybe half-siblings? Rimuru asked with the tilt of his head as he brought a hand to his chin. Ho ho ho, that wouldn't be entirely accurate, Sir Rimuru. The elder responded with an amused chuckle, one I couldn't help but mirror. That's right, as you stated, you were born of the storm dragon's blood, unlike Charybdis. This and the fact that you possess a high level of intelligence means you are more similar to Lady Viridia herself compared to any of her magical offshoots. I added on as Rimuru nodded his head and breathed out a sigh of relief. If I may ask, was it Lady Viridia that gave you your name? Yes, Rimuru answered as his expression became a bit somber. Apparently the hero's seal had been slowly draining her of her Magicules, and given how long she had been sealed, she told me she most likely had another 100 years or so before she lost all of her power and that she would most likely pass on when that happened. Naming me took a large amount of the Magicules she had remaining, and so... now things made a lot more sense. The sudden disappearance of the storm dragon, and the appearance of Rimuru in the forest not a few weeks later. Bringing a child into the world took a lot of power for monsters, and naming them was just as dangerous, especially after being weakened. If the seal truly had been draining the storm dragon's power, then she must have used the last of that power to name Rimuru, her successor and heir. The boy may as well be the young lord of the forest right now, and the most powerful creature dwelling within it too. It was a good thing they had earned his favor and trust long ago, otherwise who knows what could have happened. So yeah, that's why I need to see to the goblin crisis myself. Rimuru said, bringing the attention to himself once more. My mother entrusted me with the forest. She warned me of the changes that would occur both within the forest and the threats that may come from outside. It's why I agreed to train with the elder, and why I've been doing my own training from the village. I see, I muttered. I could see the resolve in the young lord's eyes, and knew there was no stopping him at this point. He wasn't here to ask for permission, he had just come to let us know that he would be leaving, and I take it you will be leaving on your own. It will be faster that way. I plan on taking to the skies as soon as I step outside. Hopefully I can reach the next goblin settlement before the wolves do. All I need is the general direction and I can figure it out from there. Rimuru said. I nodded my head a few times as I finally came to accept the reality of the situation. I nodded to the blue-haired ogre who stood next to my son. He was part of the scouting team that had brought us this information. Nodding his head in understanding, he then turned towards Rimuru. The last attacked goblin settlement was to the southwest of here. From what we've seen, the wolves are attacking these settlements at night, and by morning nothing will be left but blood and corpses. As it stands, the wolves number about 200, all adult males, with the leader being an evolved black wolf. He explained with a straight, almost cold, expression. This ogre was a close friend of my son. He wasn't one to express himself often, always keeping a neutral or cold expression that deterred many other ogres. But his level head and efficiency in scouting and intel gathering made him an invaluable member of the village. I see, Rimuru said as he took in the information that had been presented to him. That's a rather large pack for dogs though, isn't it? Under normal circumstances, yes. Dire wolf packs usually number 100 or slightly about, that's including females and children. However, evolved creatures, or superior creatures, tend to have a larger influence over weaker ones. In this case, the black wolf leader has been taking grown male dire wolves from several packs within the forest and has amassed a small army. I explained to Rimuru. And the young and females? Rimuru asked with a frown, most likely already having a guess as to what the answer would be. They were cast aside. Most of the females from the various packs have begun to group together in order to protect and provide for the young. I responded, it was truly a barbaric act, all for the sake of gaining more power and influence. And it seemed Sir Rimuru agreed if the way he clenched his fists was any indication. All right, I think I've heard enough, Rimuru said as he took a deep breath to calm himself before letting it out. Okay, if that's everything then I best be on my way now. Ah, wait, Sir Rimuru, I called out as I stood abruptly, at least allow some of my men to escort you on your endeavor. I suggested. Thanks but no thanks, Rimuru stated as he turned back towards me. We all watched in surprise as black scales began to form on some parts of his skin with specks of blue. 2 white horns appeared on top on his head and 2 big draconic wings sprung out his back. I intend to fly there. The sooner I put a stop to this the better. At full speed I can probably make it in time to intercept the wolves at the next goblin village. Worst case scenario I catch them in the act. I see. I didn't like it, but I had to accept that any attempt to help Lord Rimuru at this point would only be holding him back. Besides, he's more than capable of handling himself against a bunch of dogs and goblins, so there was no need for me to be concerned. Very well then, I wish you luck, Sir Rimuru, I said with a quick bow, an action that was promptly followed by all the other ogres. Thank you everyone, Rimuru said, his voice warm and happy. I should be back home within a week at the most, he said before running out the room and therefore not hearing the way many of the ogres gasped and began to whisper at his words. Home, huh? I couldn't help but think with an amused chuckle. It was good to know that Sir Rimuru felt at home with our people, and our decision to welcome him and ally ourselves with him turned out to be the right one in the end. To think we've been hosting the next lord of these lands as our guest. I couldn't help but laugh a bit at the irony of it all. After taking a minute to compose myself, I gathered the attention of all present, silencing those who had been whispering and chatting about the recent revelation. Listen up everyone. This revelation may just change everything within the forest of Jura. I started out by stating the obvious. If Lord Rimuru truly is the son of Lady Viridia, which I believe is the truth, then it is a good thing that we have made an ally of him, and it is of utmost importance that it remains that way. As her heir, he'll more than likely become the next ruler of these lands given time, I said, casting a glare at my son as I stressed the importance of our relations with Rimuru. Chief, how should we tell the other villagers about this? Should we tell them? One of the council members asked. It was a valid question. At this point it was better for us to take the side of caution and have everyone be in the know. Yes, I will make the announcement this afternoon, I declared before turning towards my son. Now, as for you. He flinched. He knew he was in trouble, but most likely he was only acknowledging that now since Rimuru had revealed his heritage. Father, I cut him off by raising my hand to silence him. I honestly didn't want to hear any of his excuses. Nothing he said would justify his behavior. The way you've acted towards our guest has been nothing short of shameful, and all because you couldn't see past your own foolish pride. You've disrespected him, insulted him, and now you dared to point your blade at him, I chastised as my son looked down. He seemed able to grasp the gravity of how his actions could have cost us. However, there was one thing I needed to make clear to him. Sir Rimuru chose not to punish you for your actions, but that was mainly due to the intervention of your sister. Had she not done so, there was a chance you would not be alive right now. While Rimuru didn't seem the type to kill without significant reason, which one could argue this qualified since my son had pointed his blade at him, that didn't mean the next powerful Majin they came across would be as understanding and kind. If my son was to lead our people one day, he needed to learn to set aside his pride for the betterment of the people who followed him. For your punishment, I will be taking away your right to wield a sword until such a time that I feel you have redeemed yourself or feel you have learned your lesson, I said as my son's head shot up at me with wide eyes. But father, I cannot grow stronger without my blade, he shouted, clearly shocked, but honestly it was what he deserved. You should have thought about that before raising and pointing it at our guest. I mean, what were you thinking when you did that? Lord Rimuru allowed you to verbally air your grievances and frustrations, but what you did after was taking it a step too far, I shouted as my own anger was beginning to surface, my aura beginning to flare as I glared at my foolish son. It had been a long time since I'd had to scold any one of my children. Taking into account that none of us knew his heritage, we have no reason to attack someone with such immense power, especially when they don't have any intent to do us harm. Your actions could have cost not just your life but the lives of every ogre in this village. How can you not understand that? My son didn't respond, his gaze returning to the floor once more. The other ogres in the room silent, knowing it was not their place to speak right now. I took a deep breath and forced myself to calm down. my aura receding as I did so. "Your blade." I spoke up in the silence of the room. The implications were clear, and my son understood. He slowly and hesitantly unbuckled his sheathed blade from his waist before presenting it to me whilst holding it vertically with both hands. I took the blade and placed it in my lap. "This will be returned when I feel you are ready. You'd best hope that Lord Rimuru doesn't hold your behavior for the past month against you." A secret that she kept so well hidden that none knew about it, except us. And that was the fact that Our Lady was with child. She told us of how she had laid the egg thousands of years ago, that had yet to hatch, much to her dismay. She never went into the specifics, only stating that she knew that the egg would hatch one day and her heir would be brought into this world. It was a sad tale if I'd ever heard one, but her resolve and belief to protect and watch over the egg until the day it hatched was awe-inspiring. Not many monsters would have bothered, even among the intellectual species. Most would just assume the child was too weak and had most likely died, but Our Lady believed otherwise. Whenever Our Lady left the forest for one reason or another, she would leave the egg in our care, trusting us to nurture and protect in her stead. I can't even begin to explain what an honor that was, to know that Lady Viridia trusted us so. We carried out that task to the best of our ability, keeping the egg within the Dryads and Treants territory. My sisters and I watched over the egg at every moment, keeping it warm and protected from harm or the changing weathers of the forest. However, it wasn't long until Our Lady was sealed away by a powerful hero. Her egg with us at the time. We offered to watch over the egg in her place, and swore we wouldn't let any harm come to the young lord or lady within. However, she denied us, claiming that she wanted to be there when her child came into the world. She wanted to be the first one the child saw and vice versa. In the end, we left the egg within the cave with Our Lady, and resumed our duties as guardians of the forest, protecting Our Lady's domain. Doing our best to repay the kindness and trust she had shown us, and now, 300 years after her sealing, Our Lady's aura had vanished from the forest, though we was not concerned. No, we were elated, happy, for Our Lady had finally met her child just as she had been wishing for a long time now. The young lord was named Rimuru, and he in turn gave them both the family name Tempest. After exchanging a few more words, the young lord would then go on to use a rather peculiar unique skill to consume the barrier surrounding his mother, consuming her in the process too, with the promise of releasing her someday. Ever since then, we have been keeping an eye on the young lord, watching as he easily made his way up the sealed cave, devouring and gaining the abilities of various monsters. We watched as he his one-sided encounter with the humans that had come to explore the cave. We watched as he met and settled into the ogre village. We watched, and watched, waiting for the chance where we would be able to present ourselves to him. And so, when I finally learned through the whispers of the plants and trees that Lord Rimuru would be leaving the ogre village to settle the goblin massacres, I couldn't help but see a chance. "Sisters." I called out to my sisters Tria and Doris, whom had been enjoying some time making flower crowns within our part of the forest. "It seems Lord Rimuru has decided to involve himself in the goblin-wolf crisis. This may just be the chance we've been waiting for to present ourselves to the young lord." Chapter 8, Managers and Guardian. Rimuru Pav. It's been hours since I left the ogre village, flying above the trees as fast as my draconic wings could carry me. I had already gone through 3 goblin villages that had been thoroughly destroyed without a single survivor left alive. It had been nothing but a scene of gore and blood, and the stench of rotting flesh everywhere, and given my now sensitive nose, it was not a fun time for me. Seeing gory things was not a first for me given my previous life. One doesn't work in special forces without seeing their fair share of corpses and even becoming a bit numb and desensitized to it all. Covert ops, assassinations, heck, even dealing with drug cartels and the likes. I'd seen all kinds of morbid scenes in my life, and while they still disturbed me to some extent, I had gotten used to it over time. It was different from back when I saw my first corpse or had my first kill. It took me a while before I reached the location of the next goblin village, and as expected, it had been reduced to the ground as well. The condition of the goblin bodies was something very few people would be able to stomach. I barely could, despite seeing this in the previous villages. The only difference in this village was that they were signs of the attack being recent, unlike the previous villages. A fireplace still had some smoke coming out of it, the area wasn't yet filled with the overwhelming stench of rotten flesh, and lastly there were still some fresh paw prints on the ground. The attack more than likely happened yesterday or last night. I thought as I looked at the mutilated corpses of the goblins all around me, From torn limbs, chunks of flesh ripped open, large gash marks, I could tell these goblins had never really stood a chance. And given that I hadn't seen any dire wolf corpses in each village I visited in any of the villages I had passed through, I can assume it was just a one-sided slaughter. Asterisk, this isn't even a territorial war anymore. No, it never was. From the very beginning it was mass genocide. The wolves were quite literally preying on the weak and looking to eradicate them. This was the fourth village I'd seen now, and based on the time span of the rumor mill in the ogre village, the attacks had been going on for 2 weeks now. The wolves weren't attacking every day. If they were, they would be a lot more destroyed goblin villages. More than likely these brief pauses are when the current alpha black wolf had been taking over other wolf packs and taking their males to further grow his fighting force. If I was lucky, the wolves wouldn't be attacking the next settlement tonight. If not, then I just had to hope I made it there in time. I was brought out of my thoughts when I sensed three magical presences forming a few meters behind me. I swiftly turned around and drew my blade, holding it in both arms as I pointed it in the direction my magic sense guided me to. It wasn't long before the air around me changed and 3 glowing leaves appeared in front of me, carried by a gentle circular breeze. Said leaves then began to glow brighter and brighter until I was forced to close my eyes, but I kept watch through magic sense, so I would not be caught off guard in the event that this was an attack of some kind. When the light eventually died out, I was surprised to see 3 girls of unnatural and angelic beauty appeared in front of me. They appeared to be around 16 years of age, 18 at the most. All 3 of them had green hair and eyes, and seemed to be dressed similarly. They were most likely sisters then or had a close relationship. They all had a green aura surrounding them that felt relaxing, their scent reminding me of the morning breeze of the forest, and strangely enough they each had 2 vines surrounding them rising from the ground. I also had to admit that they were really beautiful. While I couldn't really see their figure, I could tell they were each well-shaped, had a sizable bust, especially the one in front, and they carried themselves in an almost regal and serene manner that just added to the mystery around them. I mentally slapped myself, sharpening my eyes as I tightened my grip on the blade I had pointing at them. "Who are you?" I asked sternly. As beautiful as these girls were, I could tell they were each strong. Judging by their aura alone, they were each way stronger than any of the ogres in the village. I had assumed the ogres were the strongest species in the forest based on their words, but maybe they weren't, or maybe these girls weren't from the forest. Either way, I couldn't let my guard down even if I was stronger. "Please do not be alarmed, Rimuru Tempest, we mean you no harm," the girl closest to me responded. The fact that she knew my name did not earn her any favors in my opinion. Having a potential enemy know about you whilst you were in the dark was a disadvantage. Basic knowledge for any kind of soldier, knowledge was power. Without it, there were too many unknown variables that could lead to one's demise. That wasn't an answer, I responded firmly. At the very least I could tell they were being honest and had no actual intention of starting anything with me, but that didn't mean that I had to lower my guard. My unique skill, desire, had the ability to manipulate and sense the emotions of others. While I hadn't had many opportunities to test out the first ability, I had gotten very good at using the second. Through desire, I could sense how someone was feeling and their intentions, and if I knew the person well enough or got enough time to get a proper read, I'd even be able to tell what they wanted based on their emotions alone. None of the girls in front of me were being particularly hostile or had any malicious intent. If anything, they seemed happy and almost excited despite the calm expressions they had on their faces. "Ah, please forgive my rudeness, Lord Rimuru." The elder caught me off guard as to why she would address me in such a manner. I was further shocked when she and the other 2 dropped on one knee and bowed their heads. "My name is Trainee, and these are my sisters Tria and Doris. We are honored to finally meet you, Lord Rimuru." The sisters, Tria and Doris, said simultaneously. The key word that I latched onto there was, finally. These girls knew me somehow, and by the looks of things I can only assume they have been watching me or something along those lines. "My sisters and I are dryads, caretakers and managers of the forest, assigned by Lady Viridia, your mother," Trainee said as she raised her head and met my eyes with her own, a teasing smile that unnerved me if only a little. There were a lot of things to unravel in Trainee's last statement. The first being that they were dryads in this world. As in the tree babes that every teen most likely saw in an ecchi fantasy manga or something along those lines. While the ones in front of me weren't dressed quite as revealingly as one would have hoped, they were still very pretty nonetheless. Shaking my head sideways, I quickly focused on the more important parts of what they had just. The part about them being the managers of the forest really got to me, and the manner in which they spoke about my mother. Perhaps they had been direct subordinates of hers or something. Through desire, I could tell that Trainee had been nothing but honest with every word she said, meaning she really had been appointed manager by my mother. It would also explain how she may know about me, though I needed to be sure. How did you know about me? I've kept my heritage a secret since coming into the forest? I asked as I sheathed my blade. I had no reason to keep being suspicious of these girls anymore. I could tell they held no ill will. Besides, I could always react with a skill or art if need be. We dryads have knowledge of essentially all that happens within the forest, being connected to the plant life. I suppose that made sense. They were tree spirits after all, but the main reason we know of your existence is because Lady Viridia would entrust your egg in our care whenever she left the forest. Aside from Lady Viridia, we too have been eagerly awaiting the day you would awaken, my lord. I was a bit surprised by that one. Of all the things I expected Trainee to reveal, that was certainly not one of them. And once more I could tell there was no deceit behind their words. Desire really was useful for picking out stuff like that. Still though, if my mother trusted these dryads to not only make them the managers of her domain, but to also watch over my current body prior to my birth, then that meant they could be trusted. And judging by how they were behaving, they were also more than willing to pledge themselves to me as Viridia's heir and the current guardian of the forest. If you knew that I had come into this world, then why are you only showing yourselves now? I asked. She had basically admitted to having eyes all over the forest due to plants. There was no way they hadn't known I was staying within the ogre village, or the week I spent traversing the forest before meeting the ogres. For people who claimed to have been eager for my arrival, they were rather late in welcoming me. Please forgive our late introductions. Ever since the disappearance of Our Lady, there has been a major shift in the forest. We have had to keep a closer eye on things than we'd normally have to. It kept us from properly introducing ourselves until now. Trainee responded with a somewhat guilty expression, one that was shared by her sisters. Well damn, I didn't mean to guilt-trip them or anything like that. And I couldn't really fault them for it either. I'd indirectly given them more work by devouring my mother, so I had no right to ask why I was only meeting them now. Don't worry about it. I should be the one apologizing for not lending a hand sooner. Mother warned me about the changes that would take place with the absence of her aura. I responded with a reassuring smile, one that quickly helped them ease up and start smiling and giggling again. Still though, there were urgent matters to be tended to right now, so can I assume that you're also here because of the goblin situation? I asked as I doubted they would only come here for introductions and greetings if they had been putting on hold for so long. Yes, to be more precise, we've come to lend our aid to you however we can. As you've already concluded, the extermination of the goblins cannot be allowed to continue, lest the balance of the forest be lost. Trainee explained. It seemed she was the spokesperson of the dryads as the others had yet to speak since getting here. Still though, I wasn't going to reject any help, especially from spirits that had the ability to see the events occurring all over the forest. Bringing a hand to my chin, I closed my eyes and thought. While stopping the dire wolves was the priority, I'd rather not have to wipe them out either. As Trainee said, balance in the forest had to be maintained. Besides, I had to think about the female wolves and pups that were somewhere out there in the forest. I see. I really appreciate it. My two major concerns at the moment are which goblin village will be attacked next and the young and female wolves from different packs that according to the ogres have banded together. I said as I looked over the ruins of the goblin village and the corpses scattered all over. If possible, I'd like to deal with this situation without killing many of the wolves. Most were likely forced to follow the Black Wolf into his grand ambitions of taking over the forest. Not to mention the whole issue with the abandoned females and young doesn't sit well with me. If I may, it seemed one of the sisters had decided to speak up. Tria, if I remember the name well. I've been keeping track of the other wolves left behind. They seem to be doing well together under the leadership of a decently strong female dire wolf. She explained. Good to know they weren't suffering or at a loss of what to do, but still the situation could not remain as it was. I see. My plan was to intercept the wolves at the next goblin village they planned to raid. Tria, would you and Doris be able to convince abandoned wolves to come there as well, preferably after I've dealt with the issue at hand? I asked. It would certainly save me the trouble of flying all over the forest trying to find a few dozen wolves. With relative ease, my lord, Us dryads are relatively well known and respected by all intelligent species within the forest, since most times we act on behalf of Lady Viridia. Tria said with a smile. Open double-angle bracket notice. Dryads are well known as the keepers of the forest, and will not hesitate to give out divine punishment to those who mean the forest harm. Many creatures in the forest benefit from their protection and acknowledge their strength. However, due to their long lifespans, they are rarely seen by other species, only being spotted once every few centuries. Close double-angle bracket. Great Sage, to the rescue with an in-depth answer. Most of the info was stuff that I'd already pieced together from what they had told me. Still, that part about divine justice did pique my curiosity. Given their elegance and gentle features, I honestly could not see them killing monsters or humans. Still though, the strength I felt from them was no joke, especially Trainee, who seemed to be a cut above the other two. Then I suppose it's a good thing I was about to suggest Trainee come with me when I confront the wolves. Hopefully your reputation in the forest will help put an end to this before any more blood can be shed unnecessarily. I said before facing Trainee, who nodded her head in agreement to my request. Having the dryads here seemed to make things a lot easier for me. Even better was the fact that Trainee apparently knew the next goblin village that was going to be attacked next, having been keeping track of their activities. It certainly saved me the hassle of having to fly up all over the place for the rest of the day. With our plan finally set, Tria and Doris left by doing some sort of plant teleportation. Seeing as the wolves had only been attacking the goblin settlements at night, and the sun was just reaching its peak, meaning it was noon, I decided that Trainee and I would go to the next village by foot. It would give me the chance to actually get to know her, and through her a bit about her sisters too. I also had some questions regarding my mother too. Then there was the fact that these dryads were the managers of the forest. If I was going to be the guardian in place of my mother, then chances were I was going to be interacting with Trainee and her sisters a lot more in the foreseeable future. It had been about 2 hours since we departed from the ruined goblin village. Trainee and I had just been making light conversation, getting to know each other better. I had to remind her on several occasions that she didn't need to be so formal and respectful, but I guess it would take a while for the message to stick. I partially understood why they were that way though. Trainee had told me about her past, how she and her sisters had left their previous home after the Queen of Spirits died and were left with nowhere to go. Apparently Viridia had taken them into the forest, and given them a place to call home. In exchange they swore their loyalty to her, and were appointed the managers of the forest. However, they were further surprised and touched by the trust my mother had shown them when she entrusted the dryads with the egg that held her child, her heir, in other words me. Naturally they made sure to repay that trust with nothing but their best efforts, and along the way they also became invested in the well-being of the young lord or lady within. In a way you could say they had been waiting for my birth just as much as my mother. Though maybe not to the same level. I did ask Trainee if she knew I was a reincarnation, though I was more subtle about it in case she didn't know. She understood the message and confirmed that they did know I was an otherworlder. However, they also knew that the only reason Viridia's egg had not hatched after over 2 millennia was because the hatchling within had no soul, and that the only way it would gain one at that point was through reincarnation. However, what neither the dryads nor my mother had expected was that I would retain all the memories of my previous life. Though according to Trainee that was a good thing, as it showed I had a powerful soul if it could transfer between worlds unscathed. This meant my potential for growth was that much higher. But in the end all of that was irrelevant. As far as they were concerned, I was Viridia's child. The details of my former life weren't a concern for them. Viridia had accepted me as her child, and me her as my mother. That being said, I did ask her to keep the fact I was an otherworlder a secret for the time being. I doubted many monsters would take kindly to the fact that an ex-human was about to become the guardian of their forest. With that said, I also asked her to keep a tight lid on the fact that I had consumed my mother, as I didn't want to draw any unnecessary attention towards me or the forest in general. It seems we have guests, Lord Rimuru, Trainee said as she looked on ahead of us, prompting me to do the same. I was rather surprised when multiple small humanoid figures appeared not too far ahead in front of us. More specifically, these were goblins. I could tell just by their green skin and rather short bodies. Not to mention their appearance matched that of the many corpses I had seen before. Still though, these guys looked less than ideal. From their torn clothings, their battered bodies, and even their poor weaponry. If all goblins were like this, it was a miracle their race had survived this long. Then again, it was probably due to a high fertility rate or something like that. Strong ones? Do you have business here? One of the goblins asked. He seemed to be the leader of this group. He had a red bandana around his head. However, just like all the other goblins, he was shaking in fear, though held on tight to his weapon. Judging by how they had addressed Trainee and I, they were well aware that they would not win any confrontation, and thus were trying diplomacy. However, using desire, I could also tell that they were greatly troubled by something and wanted to ask something, but were simply too scared to do so. Perhaps it had something to do with the wolves? Yes, we're investigating changes that have occurred in the forest since the disappearance of the storm dragon. Is there any particular reason you are blocking our path? Are you perhaps planning to rob us? I asked, trying to sound stern. It was probably a bit overkill given that these guys were already shaking in their boots, but seeing them look like they were about to piss themselves was also kinda funny. You are mistaken, strong one. We would never dare to steal from one as strong as you, not to mention a dryad of the forest. The goblin with the red bandana said as he immediately went down on the ground and groveled, an action that was copied by the rest of the goblins as they threw down their arms and groveled. However, if you are still offended, I ask that you spare my comrades and take my life as payment. Woo! I have to respect that kind of loyalty. Though it's also kind of stupid to sacrifice yourself without knowing if I would even keep my word. I doubt I would get anything from eating the goblins, so there wasn't really a reason to do so. Besides, I wasn't that stone-hearted as to kill him for no reason. That won't be necessary. Get up, all of you, I said as I casually waved off their behavior. I could have sworn I heard Trainee giggle from behind me, but when I turned to look at her, she had regained her serene composure. I let it go and turned back to the goblins, who once again stood straight. So what do you want from us then? Well, our village is just up ahead, you see. And we felt two strong auras approaching it and came to investigate immediately. The goblin with the red bandana explained. I had no idea what they would have actually done if we were dangerous foes, but I decided not to voice my opinions. That being said, seeing a Majin of your prowess, with a dryad no less, there is a request that we wish to ask of you. So would you please do us the honor of coming to our village? I turned to Trainee to see what she thought about this. I mean, it was obvious they wanted to ask for our help with the impending attack. The dryad merely looked back at me with a somewhat amused smile. I sighed, knowing that I wouldn't be getting anything from her. Was this some sort of test? These dryads had literally just shown up and offered their assistance in my mission, but now that I really thought about it, they hadn't really offered their own inputs or thoughts on my plan. They just went along with whatever I asked. Whether that was the extent of their loyalty or if they really were testing me in some way, I didn't know. Guess I'd find out later. Your village, huh? I said as I turned back to the frightful goblins. Very well then, I'm willing to hear you out. Take us to your village. You have our deepest gratitude, strong one. All the goblins exclaimed in unison as they bowed their heads. And so the goblins lead us to their village. Trainee and I were taken to the goblin village, if it could even be called that. The place was extremely basic and very substandard. The houses looked frail and didn't have any proper support. One blow from the big bad wolf, they would come falling faster than the straw house of the little pig. The goblin chief was a frail old man who looked like he was going to keel over any minute now. I was surprised that they had allowed such an old goblin to continue running the village. They tried to be hospitable, but they didn't really have anything to offer, so I merely asked them to skip the pleasantries and get straight to the reason they had asked us to come. And so the goblin chief and the goblin with the red bandana, who was apparently his son, explained their situation to us. As expected, the dire wolves had already begun to attack this village. They had already suffered considerable losses since the attacks began. There had once been a named warrior. He was the goblin chief's eldest son. He gave his life to deliver some information on the wolves. A real trooper in my eyes. But given the lack of strength, that named goblin may have died in vain had I not come here today. I see. Your situation is indeed quite dire, I muttered. I might as well save this village whilst dealing with the wolves. It had always been the plan to intercept them before they struck the next goblin village. Given the state of things, I had partially failed, but as long as they were survivors, then it wasn't a complete failure. We have heard your request to intervene in the dire wolf raids, Trainee suddenly spoke up, bring the attention of all present to her, myself included. She hadn't spoken a word since we encountered the goblins, so part of me had just started to ignore her. But what are you willing to offer us in return? What? I was actually surprised to hear Trainee ask that. Wasn't she supposed to be the protector of the forest or something along those lines? The individual whom you've requested aid from is no ordinary Majin. His name is Rimuru Tempest. She started once more. My eyes widened in alarm as I realized what she was about to reveal. However, it seemed I was too late. He is the son of the Storm Dragon, Our Lady, Viridia, and the next lord of these lands. Surely you have something you can offer him after making such a request. I was shocked. The goblins were terrified as their heads went down against the ground and they immediately began to beg for my forgiveness. I was more surprised that Trainee had put the goblins on the spot like that. I mean seriously, for a second there she nearly reminded me of the ogre chiefess. Those two should never be allowed to meet, I decided. Please forgive us, Lord Rimuru. We had no idea, the goblin chief said as both him and his son were shaking like leaves. I kinda actually felt sorry for them. But at the same time I had to remind myself that this was how this world worked, survival of the fittest, as my mother had told me. Given that, there was no reason for me to expect the people of this world to function with the same morals as my world. In this particular situation I was the stronger being whilst the goblins were weaker. My responsibilities as guardian were to the forest, my mother's domain, rather than the creatures that actually dwelled, or at least that's what I got from Viridia and Trainee. Whilst they had both worked to protect the domain, they had never really involved themselves with the disputes that took place within the forest. Not unless it threatened the forest as a whole. Was that an example I was going to follow? I wasn't quite sure yet. The way I saw it, without Mother here to establish her dominance, the forest was likely to collapse from within or get taken over from the outside. Such was the effect when a major power vanished. As for what we can offer, I'm afraid we goblins don't have anything that would be of value to give to you, the goblin chief said in resignation. Even I could tell they didn't have anything of value, which made me wonder why Trainee had brought it up in the first place. All we have to offer is our unflattering loyalty. So please, Lord Rimuru, grant us your divine protection. The son and chief were once more groveling. This was starting to get old and uncomfortable real fast. Looking to the entrance of the hut we were in, I saw a few goblins peeking in from the other side. I could even sense a few more on the other side of the walls, most likely trying to listen in. One thing I could tell from their desires was that they were all desperate, and they were all scared. They were just as scared of me as they were of the dire wolves, maybe even more so. But they were all so desperate enough to risk asking for my aid and possibly failing than to just let the dire wolves kill them off. As for them suddenly swearing their loyalty to me, I had no idea what to make of it. Feeling out Trainee's emotions, I realized she was just curious to see if I was satisfied with the offering, and how I would proceed. Meaning she had been expecting this. I didn't know if I should be annoyed at her pushing this without at least telling me, or if I should be nervous of her manipulating nature. Still, these goblins had far more to benefit by me taking them in than I did. They were the weakest species in the forest by default, and with their current numbers it wasn't like they were an army or anything. Regardless, I couldn't leave them to die. I was already dealing with the wolves one way or another. Might as well save a goblin village whilst I was at it. I would figure out what to do with their sworn loyalty after that. Very well then, I accept your loyalty. From this day on you're now my subordinates, under my divine protection, I said as I allowed a smile to come onto my face, if only so they wouldn't be so fearful of me. I then summoned a barrel filled with the processed healing potion and placed it in front of the two goblins. To mark this occasion, take this barrel of healing potions. Take it and use it to tend and treat your wounded. The two goblins looked at me wide-eyed as tears began to fill the corner eyes. The chief's son was quick to call in other goblins into the tent to help carry the barrel out, while the chief groveled once more. Thank you so much for your generosity, Lord Rimuru. We are eternally grateful to you, and from this day forward we are your loyal servants, the chief said once more, barely able to contain the tears that threatened to pour out of his eyes. Good. See to the injured for now. Then gather the rest of the village outside as soon as possible. It's time we deal with the wolves before they can do any more harm, I said seriously. Right away, my lord, the chief said as he swiftly stood up and followed his son and the other goblins. I already had a plan in mind to deal with the direwolves, but it hinged on them being the prideful creatures I was assuming they were. Especially the pack leader. If it worked, then he would be the only casualty by the end of the night. If not, then a few more direwolves would die before the rest either fled or submitted, and in the worst case scenario I'd have to kill them all. Either way, it was all coming to an end tonight. Black Wolf Pav. I stood upon a large stone slab gazing at the full moon that stood at its peak in the night sky. Tonight is the night, I declared to my pack through thought communication. My pack numbered a little over 200. All males, and our numbers made us strong. I'd proven myself as the strongest direwolf in the forest, fighting and defeating all the other wolf pack leaders in the forest. My efforts had been rewarded by my evolution into a black wolf. My superior strength recognized by the voice of the world itself. Now it was time for me to extend my reach to the entire forest, starting off by eliminating the weaker races. Without the storm dragon to grant its divine protection, it's the perfect opportunity for us dire wolves to rule this forest. The members of my pack responded with excited howls. We will tear through our foes with our mighty fangs and claws, for we are the apex predators of this forest. The pack responded with louder howls that filled the night sky. Good, they were excited. That meant they would fight to the best of their ability. I leapt off the pillar and began a full sprint into the forest, the pack following close behind. We ran faster than the wind itself. Within minutes we had arrived at the goblin village, only to find two figures standing in our way. The first one shocked even me. It was unmistakably a dryad. The protectors of this forest and the ones who gave out divine punishment. As soon as my eyes fell on the second figure, I knew they were undeniably strong. Even more so that the dryad beside him. The aura they were radiating made my own instincts yell at me to retreat. It almost felt as though he were the predator and I was the prey. But regardless, I wouldn't retreat. We direwolves were prideful creatures who never turned tail. And so I stepped forward and addressed them. Who are you? Why would the dryads of the forest and Imogen stand in our way and protect the goblins? I asked. My name is Rimuru Tempest. I am the son of the storm dragon Varadia, and the goblins you wish to attack are under my protection. The Majin, Rimuru Tempest, declared firmly. Direwolves, you have two options, either you submit to me or die at my hand. The Majin added before unleashing even more of his aura, causing my pack and I to tremble as we tried to keep upright despite the pressure being released. This Majin, is he truly the son of the storm dragon? Father, perhaps we should reconsider. My son spoke up from beside me. He was a direwolf unlike any that had come before him, unique in appearance. He had silver fur surrounding his neck and appearing at the end of his limbs and tail. He also had a star-shaped mark on his forehead formed by a darker shade of fur. Shut up! I barked at him, quickly forcing him to take some steps back. We are wolves, apex predators of the forest. We do not yield to anyone. Despite my words, even I knew that I stood no chance against neither the dryad nor the Majin. Regardless, retreat was not an option, not when there was such an opportunity to expand our reach within this forest. I was sure we could overwhelm these two with our superior numbers at the very least. Attack! Numerous wolves charged forward at my command, ready to utilize their greater numbers for coordinated attack. I watched as the Majin cast a single glance towards the dryad, who responded with a nod. In the next second, numerous vines and tree roots sprouted from the ground and effectively trapped the charging wolves. Strangely enough, none were killed, but they were still unable to set themselves free, their limbs held securely and their jaws snapped shut. Have you made your choice then? The Majin Rimuru suddenly said, drawing all eyes on him, his expression cold and his voice sending shivers down all who heard, friend and foe alike. Very well then. Leader of the dire wolves, for the massacres against the goblins, abandonment of the females and young of your own kind, and threatening to disrupt the balance of the forest, I, Rimuru Tempest, shall give you the death penalty. Do you have any last words? As if I would allow myself to be defeated that easily. I shouted in blind rage as I charged towards my opponent. Deep within I knew this was suicide, that I stood no chance against this being far superior to me, but if I was going to die, I would die with my pride intact. I leapt into the air, claws out and fangs bared, ready to tear into the flesh of my foe as I descended upon him. Only for my body to come to a halt as several sturdy strings suddenly wrapped around my limbs and neck, effectively holding me in place in mid-air. Struggling proved useless. If anything, it only made it painful as the string began to dig into my skin, drawing blood. I never had any intention of harming your pack, just so you know. I only wanted you to stop your crusade. But I can see now that you have no intention of doing so. The Majin spoke as he calmly walked towards me, his aura covering his right hand in the shape of a large three-pointed claw. Take comfort in the fact that should your pack submit to me, they will be cared for, along with all the other wolves you abandoned. Dragon Claw. The world went dark before I could even blink or respond, though his words did bring at least some peace to my soul. Knowing that my son and the rest would be cared for. Rimuru Pav. My attack cut right through the black wolf's neck like a knife through butter, his head falling to the ground with a loud, splat sound. Stepping back, I released the strings that bound the now headless body, allowing it to drop next to the decapitated head. It was unfortunate that it had come to this, but it had been expected. And even if he had given up and submitted to me, I wouldn't have been able to trust him in the long term. I could sense his level of ambition through desire, and that meant he would more than likely betray me for his own goals. Hopefully, with the death of their leader and my show of strength, the other wolves would fall in line. Still though, it wouldn't hurt to further prove my superiority just so they didn't try and usurp my authority. Devour my prey, apex predator. I called out as I consumed the downed alpha wolf with my unique skill. His strength added to my own through assimilation, increasing my power by a small fraction whilst Great Sage analyzed its skills. Open double angle bracket notice. Black Wolf skills have been successfully acquired. User has acquired Thought Communication and Menace. Due to already possessing the skill, Keen Sense has been converted to Magicules through assimilation and used to further increase your strength. Asterisk. So skills I already have are just added onto the strength absorbed from my prey. That's good to know. It meant that nothing would go to waste when I devoured something. Talk about efficiency. Turning to the other 200 or so wolves, I spoke whilst unleashing Menace. So what will the rest of you do now? Will you submit to me or go your own ways? I wanted to make it clear that they were free to leave as long as they didn't cause trouble, but if they chose to fight, then their lives were forfeit. The unique dire wolf with a star pattern on his head stepped forward with his head lowered submissively. I remember hearing him address the black wolf as father, guess that made him the new pack leader. The rest of the wolves followed suit without complaint, bowing their heads in submission, even the ones Trainee released from her vines. We yield to you, strong one. Our pack will follow you. The unique wolf declared as all the rest howled in agreement. It was quite a strange sight, to see over 200 wolves bowing down to a single individual. But I was glad that it was over. From behind me I could hear the goblins celebrating and praising Trainee and I. Trainee herself looked very satisfied with the turn of events. Great, there were no complaints. Now all that was left to figure out what I was going to do with the sudden increase in subordinates? That's not even counting the other 200 plus wolves, pups that Doris and Tria would probably be bringing in by the morning. That was something I would figure out in the morning. For now I really wanted some shut-eye after such a stressful day.